We couldn't deport him because his child only likes British chicken nuggets.
I know, and you read this stuff, you just want to cry. And this is all because of the incorporation of the European Convention on Human Rights.
Damn those human rights, regulated by the woke ECHR. Whatever next? Here we find out that an Albanian criminal couldn't be deported because of his son's fussy food tastes. But before we find out what the details are of this case, let's hear Farage bleat on.
Into British law, which our judges rule on again and again and again. How many of those that have crossed the English Channel in small boats since he became Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, how many of those have been deported?
Here's how the case was reported in The Independent. An Albanian criminal's deportation was halted partly because of his young son's aversion to foreign chicken nuggets. Clevis Disher, 39, entered the UK illegally as an unaccompanied minor. He later gave a fake name and falsely claimed to be born in the former Yugoslavia. But it turns out the facts have been twisted out of shape, as this piece from the Constitution Society points out. In February of this year, for example, the Telegraph reported that an Albanian criminal was not deported because his son disliked foreign chicken nuggets. In the actual case, the claimant was married to a British national and had 2 children, including a son with special needs, including emotional dysregulation and sensory difficulties. Counsel relied heavily on the evidence of the son's dependence on his father and his struggles to cope with mundane things, like foreign food. The first-tier tribunal initially held that it would be unduly harsh to deport the claimant because of his children's dependency on him, but this outcome was held to be irrational by the upper tribunal. This piece from the International Forum for Responsible Media blog explains how a story like this one centred around chicken nuggets can be framed differently by omitting several key pieces of information. However, this was a blatant oversimplification of the arguments made, which actually revolved around the claimant's son suffering from emotional regulation and sensory difficulties, with the example of struggling with chicken nuggets simply being used to illustrate this point as part of a far larger argument. By cherry-picking a tiny part of the judgment, they ignore the overall reasoning behind the decision, which was far more nuanced, in favour of suggesting that immigration decisions will be made over such trivial matters. Click here for a conspiracy theory video.